Sunshine to me is by far the most interesting Mario game to talk about and play. From the mechanics to the release date to even the speedrun, it's one of my favorites. So after basically reinventing the wheel for platformers and setting a baseline for 3D platformers with an incredibly high level of greatness, it's hard to follow up. What would you even begin to try to follow that up with? Maybe a bit of a refinement in some of those mechanics, giving you a much easier to create game that will guarantee some success just purely off the coattails of the previous game? Or do you take your time and come up with a unique idea, allowing for even more creativity with level design and more complex platforming? I think the idea of F.L.U.D. is incredibly creative and interesting. Its ability to give you more freeform platforming and fun waterslide movement options just makes the game that much more enjoyable for me. It feels like you have countless options for any obstacle you approach. While F.L.U.D., specifically the hover nozzle, can trivialize some options if you want, I think of it as something similar to Soulsborne game summons, as weird as that may sound. If you want the options there, and you can hard rely on them to make the game much easier, but it's really not that enjoyable to do so. I'd rather experiment more with the movement and enjoy it. Obviously that doesn't mean to never use the hover nozzle, you'd have to be a real lunatic to do that. Just that I'm not refilling it 24/7 because I hovered across the whole map. I also like it being there as an option for people that struggle with games at times, because it can help get through some of the hard parts, so everyone can experience and enjoy the game. I think gamers as a whole should be thinking more about how they can enhance their own experiences. Is this Elden Ring boss fight terrible? Okay, let's spam summons and see if we can cheese it. Is this platforming section stupid? Okay, let's hover and get it over with. F.L.U.D. is just a huge experiment, and while it's not one of the most thought out ones, I can't help but still be enamored by it even today. I can still get lost just running around Delfina Plaza, which might I add is like the greatest hub world ever. This place literally oozes with soul and excitement, from the endless secrets to just flat out fun you can have running from rooftop to rooftop. You ever wonder why sometimes when you run up a hill you're going insanely fast? Turns out when you do a dive and a rollout on a slope you get a crazy speed boost until you press anything besides the control stick. I mean, you're literally running so fast that if you run into a wall you'll actually bonk. Anyways, back to the movement. It takes most of the movement options from Super Mario 64, besides long jump, which doesn't really fit into this movement style, and adds on to them with F.L.U.D. Everything feels a bit more up to date and precise. The fastest you can travel in Sunshine is just by spraying the floor with water and diving onto it and sliding. It's really easy, but it's really fun. You get ridiculous speed with this, and it's so enjoyable. The rocket nozzle and turbo nozzle are incredibly fun as well, allowing for some unique platforming experiences, but never staying too long to the point where they reach a feeling of tediousness, which I feel like could have been reached pretty quickly by a less skilled team, especially with the rocket nozzle. In fact, I honestly would have liked a few more of the turbo nozzle platforming sections seen mostly in Delfina Plaza, hub for secret missions. Sunshine has so many of these interesting ideas and unique levels that make it such a joy to just explore and take in. Some of my favorite parts of Sunshine are exploring Noki Bay and going through these mazes and puzzles that come out of the walls, exploring the hotel and Serena Beach that feels never ending, surfing and racing on the bloopers in Rico Harbor while trying not to slam into the wall and die because you always pick the purple one for maximum speed. We aren't cowards out here. I think, however, while it's a tough call, Pianta Village is still my favorite world. It does have the dreaded Chugster level, but it also has the Goopy Inferno where you can come up with all kinds of crazy unique strats to get back to F.L.U.D. I also love saving the Piantas and giving the Chain Chomps a bath. Fighting the timer to get the Piantas out of the goop is incredibly fun to replay and try to get faster times on. The Fluff Festival coin hunt, while also optional, is still one of my favorite missions. It's pretty long, but it's so sick flying around on the flowers and gathering all the red coins. They're actually hidden pretty well too. This is definitely one of the longer missions in the game. The game overall is quite easy. I mean, it's a Mario game, right? But even that isn't without its challenges. I would also say out of the mainline Mario games, this is actually probably the hardest one. But yeah, still Mario, so it's not like you have to be worried you're going to get stuck on anything starting a playthrough. The infamous secret missions where Shadow Mario steals F.L.U.D. for the level bring some of the most fun and interesting platforming challenges I've seen. I mean, some of these levels are actually pretty messed up, and it's an absolute joy to learn and experience them. They have their fair share of jank though, and I can't deny that. Remember when I said slopes were weird in this game? Yeah, it stays true for these levels. Sometimes you'll have deaths where you just slide off something and die, and it can feel pretty unfair, but I think it's important when you're playing to understand how these work and try to play safer. It's fairly easy to avoid these jank deaths if you try to prevent Mario from being on insanely high degrees for the slopes. This can be easier said than done at times though, especially when you're trying to stay on surfaces that constantly shift and turn. Quite a few of these secret missions have spinning logs you have to try and balance on. They also do no favors by often placing these at the end of the levels just to make sure that the death you thought was jank feels even worse. I think probably the most infamous example of slipping off jank slopes is the Sandbird Shine. I'm going to say, however, for new players, this shine really isn't that horrible. I think a lot of us just had the same experience of being terrible at video games as a kid and lacking the critical thinking skills to just analyze why we were dying over and over. So just as you are finishing collecting the 7 coins on the bird, it suddenly starts to twist. You can carefully pick a spot where you walk with the bird as it turns and you can just stay on fine. Or you can even take the easier approach of as it turns doing a side flip or spin jump and hovering and landing back on the bird as it finishes its twist. It's a little awkward with the bird moving through the air, but a couple of tries and you'll have it down easy. Some people can struggle with this, but also come on, we all saw some of the funniest videos ever on YouTube coming from these deaths.
Is a bullshit. Yeah. God! I hate, and it's all go towards this game.
This is exactly what they warned us about.
Yeah.
This is, as soon as we said we were going to play Super Mario Sunshine, 55 fans came forward and were like, I can't wait until you get pissed off falling off of the bird.
I feel as though there's a certain level of bullshit a video game can have that makes it incredibly endearing. Such as Dark Souls, the bullshit boss fights and rage comps coming from them are absolutely hilarious. You're watching someone else feel the exact pain you felt, and half the time they're even struggling harder than you did. Being able to relate to someone on experiences like that gives such an extra layer of depth to my feelings on a game. I think that's partially why Elden Ring was so all-consuming on the internet for even months after its release. You're finally able to beat some terrible boss, and now you can watch your favorite streamer or YouTuber fail just as hard as you did. It's a great experience that, while may not be unique to games, is much more common in gaming and brings people together. That's part of why I fell in love with games so much. Everyone's playing the same game and we can relate and talk about how fun or terrible some parts are. Sunshine also does a pretty good job at making a lot of these hard and awkward levels optional. There are definitely some non-negotiable ones, however, like the previously mentioned Sandbird and especially the Chuckster level in Pianta Village. This level, I'm pretty sure, single-handedly gave thousands of people irreparable trauma. Like, you're lining up and calculating precise ways to talk to people, and man does it not feel that responsive. Which I think is a far cry from the rest of the game, but you've heard me ramble enough about the movement for now. With such an experimental game, there's bound to be some stinkers, but I'm just impressed by how few there are. The boat and, would probably be the only other one that's not optional that I feel like is pretty bad. It doesn't help that you have to finish a decently difficult platforming section to get there beforehand as well. I think there's such great charm in having these impossible and janky optional levels, like the Pachinko machine and the Death Lily Pad level. It's a unique challenge that you can attempt if you want to, and if not, no worries. Another level I've heard a lot of complaints about is the Manta Ray and Serena Beach. Something important to this that the game doesn't do a good job of explaining is how broken spamming R and A is for the spray shots. This almost trivializes the Manta Ray, getting tons of damage onto him and hitting a huge spread over the map, making it a breeze to kill all the little Manta Rays that split apart. It's little things like these that add so much depth to Mario's moveset and allow you to find the best ways to deal with certain bosses and platforming. The bosses as well in this game are pretty standard for platformers, mostly pretty uninteresting, like the repeated goopy piranha plants in the early game, but with the exception of a few cool ones like the Peanut Park Mecha Bowser where you have to aim rockets and shoot him while on the ride. Another thing that isn't mentioned like it should be in games is if you have a rocket and you hold a half R press, it'll go straight like it's supposed to. If you don't, the aim can be a bit off. Just another weird thing that's not mentioned that makes the game more enjoyable to play. I thought overall, the final boss against Bowser was quite enjoyable. It's pretty easy, but quite fun boosting so high into the air with the rocket nozzle and just slamming down and taking him out of the sky. It's a solid last fight to an amazing game. If you somehow can't tell from how I've been talking, Sunshine is easily my favorite Mario game, and I want people that aren't fans to understand a bit more where I'm coming from. To wrap up, I believe Super Mario Sunshine has easily the best movement out of any of the Mario games, making it an absolute joy to navigate these interesting levels. The game isn't without its fair share of poor sections, but the rest of the game just outweighs it so much for me that I honestly don't really mind it that much. Maybe it's because I've played this game to death and have a much deeper understanding of the mechanics than any normal person would just doing a playthrough, but I really think the reason I learned all this is because the base layer for the game is just so unique and lovable. Also, the aesthetic of a constant beach and resort type levels is so peak and beautiful. Every stage is absolutely gorgeous and I can't get enough of it. The experimental and different nature of Sunshine keeps me coming back, and I hope this makes you feel the urge I get to boot up once again and start another playthrough. Thanks for watching.